The cause is being masked in many ways, shapes, and forms. But what are they masking? The reduction of food globally.
Hey everyone, welcome today. This is Marjory Wildcraft, and I'm honored and pleased to have one of the influencers I follow religiously, actually getting to do an interview with him, David Devine from Adapt 2030. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Once you see the trend, if you can put points on a map and you can definitively show in certain areas where this is happening, then you can start to actually, I wouldn't say front run them, but you could guarantee that there's going to be more of this, that, or the other kind of change, calamity on the weather front. It's an opportunity for some, more rainfall, so floods for others, but you can irrigate or you can move, and you got those two choices. So you can see how the world's getting geopolitically bent on where the new rainfall patterns are coming, where the hydroelectric is going to be generated, and then the throughways to deliver from the hydroelectric dams down to the new factory zones that are being slated special economic zones in Africa.
Yeah, let's just talk for a minute, because I don't think a lot of people in my community yet really totally appreciate what it is that you bring in. And let's start out with, so is it the Greater Ethiopian Dam that's been built? It started in 2007, 2008, one of the driest places on the planet, and they're building a hydroelectric dam that will be the largest hydroelectric dam in like the whole continent over there.
Oh yeah, by far.
And in the driest place, like, why would somebody build a dam? And this is not like, this is a multi-billion-dollar project. And now, as I've been watching your channel and show, there's telephone pole deep flooding going on. The whole greening of the desert thing that's prophesied during these earth changes. How did they know? How did they know ahead of time? And then that dam is that lake reservoir is filling up, and all those areas that were completely desert are now starting to become full of water. Let me let you riff on that for a minute, because you're the guy.
Yeah, well, originally I was looking at the Maritime String of Pearls, which was China's grand plan, because China's losing a lot of production in northern China of wheat. Central areas are flooding year after year, and they see that's a trend also. So China's been actively looking for at least 15 years or longer for secondary areas on the planet where they could grow food and then transport it back to China. Basically having a grow zone outside China somewhere else. But you need a military to protect that. Well, that's the southern string of pearls, the maritime string of pearls. And it was all going to be grown in Africa. But the thing was, these white elephant projects, you look at the United Nations and World Bank funding, and literally a white elephant project where you're going to put the largest hydroelectric dam in Africa in the driest place in Africa. Now, most people would just brush that off and go, oh, they're just embezzling the money. How stupid is that? But they knew that the rains were going to return. And what's interesting is they knew when they would return within plus or minus 5 years. So wow. If you're going to, really wire in a cycle that's going to start regreening the desert, that is not limited to a very small amount of countries there. Oh, it's just going to be the tip of Africa, just going to be the Horn of Africa. That's a continent global wide event of changes to the magnitude of deserts will green again, reservoirs will fill. And not only that, new Renaissance Dam, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, but as they come down out of the foothills there's six more hydroelectric dams planned rolling down through the different elevations. Bank of America said, do what central banks are doing, buy gold. Gold is up 20% in 2024. The tech-heavy AI-driven NASDAQ only 17%. Trump warned North Carolina that a Kamala win could lead to a 1929-style crash. And even more worrisome, Schwab, Vanguard, and online brokerages experienced disruptions, leaving investors helpless. Reports coming out of a Samsung solid-state battery breakthrough sent silver skyrocketing. JP Morgan forecasts silver to surpass $36 an ounce in 2025. All of this ahead of the rate cuts, as now the market is baking in a 90% chance of rate cuts in September. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. And Patriot Gold Group has an no fee for life IRA where your IRA or 401k could be in physical gold or silver. No fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now Patriot Gold Group for the 7th year in a row, Consumer Affairs top rated IRA gold dealer. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video. And all of that will be feeder routes out to what is a new special economic zone that will benefit Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the Sudan, to mention a few. That's why they're so keen on getting Port Sudan back up and running. And that's why the Russians are there and not the Americans. But here's another interesting factoid. Back in history, we're going to take you back to 800 AD. If you go just across the Red Sea there, just into Yemen, the Marib Dam, M-A-R-I-B, Marib, was the largest water body in what was considered the Arabian Peninsula at that time, circa 800 AD. And that was just on the side of just literally a 10-minute flight from where that dam is where the Marib Dam is. So if you knew these cycles were coming back, and that area in the Marib in the south western corner of Yemen was going to fill up again, you could probably forecast out that those same weather patterns 100 miles away would also be able to fill these reservoirs. And not only that, if you take that down before it gets into where the Blue and the White Nile connect together, if you go a little bit to the west of that, that is a basin of a previous megalake. So if you look at the megalakes through the Sahel in northern Africa, say circa 6,000 years prior, oh, they had these massive lakes. They were way bigger than any of our Great Lakes in America. You could put multiple Great Lakes in America together and it still would not equal the size of just some of these smaller water bodies. They were at that time measured the largest water bodies on the planet, believe it or not, 6,000 years ago. So with all this extra precipitation and moisture, it's going to start to fill these areas again, which were the bottoms of the old previous megalakes. But the disingenuous disservice that everybody on the climate modeling side has done has told everybody in Africa, it's going to get drier, it's going to get drier, it's never going to get wet again, so keep chasing the shoreline down. So that's what they did, is the shoreline would decrease. Like Lake Chad is another good one. That's sort of central in there. As Lake Chad was shrinking, everybody in the climate side was going, it's going to go to zero. It's going to become a mud puddle and a little minnow or, frogs won't even be able to live in that. So keep chasing the water body down and good luck. Well, suddenly they've kind of reached maximum shrinkage where everything is suddenly refilling. And that's why you're having record floods across Africa, because all the towns and villages that they put there and the roads and everything was they were chasing the lakes as they were shrinking. So now you have this little tiny body of water, and they put all these towns and villages, roads, railways all around it, thinking that it was going to continue to shrink. But now it's starting to fill up. So, some of these places were like 400 feet deep before, and now you're at the very bottom of it. So even, pretty big floods would raise water levels 10 feet. And then all of a sudden you're seeing all these crazy images and videos of houses being completely inundated and covered. It's all a cycle, but you brought up the most pertinent point. Who knows? And how do they know it's coming back? And how do they keep this information hidden from the public? That's the whole thing.
And what's interesting is you're talking about, so like it was only 1,200 years ago was 800 AD. So, I mean, that we still have written history, supposedly. I mean, it's like, it's not like we were the caveman story. I mean, and then there's so many other things in our history that keep showing up, like, buildings that there's no way they could have been built by the technology that our history supposedly, claims we were. So, and I find this dam to be just another, I mean, that's a massive investment, that's not a minor event. Yeah. And so what else do they know? And where else are they investing, or what else are they doing, or why, who is controlling this that they're not letting us know? And our history having been so obscured and manipulated. I mean, it's even just like right now we're seeing Google just, if it doesn't fit a particular narrative, they will go and just wipe out references or websites that have to relate to anything that is not what they want the story to be. This is not a new thing that's happening just because of technology today. This is something that they've been doing for millennium. But they do know these cycles, right? That dam just is such a spectacular example of it. You also talk about the and we were referring earlier to Christian. Christian Westbrook was he called himself the Ice Age farmer because we're headed into a mini ice age, which has very drastic consequences for humanity and population because it's related to the amount of food that can be grown in the grow zones that we have now that are very productive, that things are shifting. And his disappearance is very strange, and his lack of communication. So I don't think he was saying anything too egregious other than like what we're talking about right now, but there are all kinds of interesting problems that are showing up in the world. But do you want to talk a little bit about the grand solar minimum? And
You have to have an excuse for the changes we were seeing or about to see. So just on the surface level, really easy analysis on that one. If they had enough information to understand that entire continental weather systems were going to start to green desert areas in the Middle East and Africa, that's a massive change that everybody would see with their eyes. You would just have to open your curtain and look out. So there'd have to be a pre-built excuse in. So when things started going awry, that, well, it would be explainable, because if it started to go with this much change that we've seen so far, but there was no explanation behind it, people would be a little unnerved. So they pre-built the excuse of global warming right into that, knowing that I am absolutely unequivocally 1000% going to make a statement that I will stand by until my grave, that they are intertwined. The same persons and organizations that control the more ancient information repositories, museums, Vatican, religious, the monarchy families that keep a lot of that older information hidden, also are working in tandem to control the populace on the planet, but also creating the excuse. So see, it's the same group of people that are the ones that are funding all of these projects. The same groups of people are pushing global warming as the reason that everything is changing. But if you knew these cycles, and you really have to have some of the oldest records and documents on the planet to get a good, who was running around the planet 500 years ago, consolidating all that into one repository or two repositories around the world. It was the same players that are right here in control today, still have a lot of the money and the power in governments. So there, you look at that and you say, okay, they knew the cycle. They had 500 years of running around the planet, getting all the codices and the stories and, putting that into, and then running it through computers to get better base models of what's really going to happen with climate, what's really going to happen. Not that you're driving an SUV, but the true cycles that are rolling in on 400-year grand solar minimum cycles, these turning of age cycles at 2,000 years, and then we get what they call like the mid-Holocene, where that's a 6,000-year cycle. Then we got these 12,500-year geomagnetic excursion cycles. So through time, if you were able to pull enough ancient information over the last 500 years out of these areas that hadn't been, well, reconnected because of the last cataclysm, then you put together a very clean picture. So if you knew that the cycle was going to green areas, and you knew this much disruptive climate changing was coming in, you would provide the excuse. So I'm saying the same ones that know the cycles are the same as what in providing excuses so they can control and you don't panic. But then if I can't grow food, in Canada anymore, or northern China, the wheat goes offline, and same with Canada, I'm going to need to find a new area on the planet to grow food. And you know what? If that area of the above ground water is increasing across Africa, plus you can tap the Nubian sandstone and the Seuss and the other dozens of aquifers under Africa, then you can have the below water resources for agriculture that are some of the purest waters on the planet. And the above ground water rainfall totals increase. So then you can bring out a new grow zone, and you can replace what's lost in these other areas because of these, well, upsets in how much food we can grow in further north latitudes, but it needs to be funded. And our present Western countries are going into, well, a hyperinflationary collapse mode economically, but nothing goes to zero. That's the whole thing. It's this turning. They need to take that money and move it into a new area on the planet that can get returns, that massive amounts of debt can be issued to restart a system. Like a global economic system needs to be restarted somewhere with a new possibility and amount of that much debt being issued. Now, if you're going to bring up a new grow zone, what do you need, Marjory? You're going to need what? Irrigation canals. You're going to need the railways. You're going to need the roads. And you could probably make a list of 100 deep that I'm even forgetting about. You're going to need to get investment there. But, China and Russia are there already. So, this whole charade and theater of whatever, these geopolitics, Ukraine's a big one because it's a grow zone. But I ultimately believe almost all this saber rattling is to see who really can control Africa, the investments there, the food production coming out of there, the mineral resources coming out of there. And this next century will be the African century, hands down. If you thought China went big these last 30, 40 years, child's play to the possibilities in Africa with the right investment.
Wow.
I know it's a little bit to digest. It's taken me years to figure and put these pieces together, but
no, that's why I really, really appreciate your channel and your research, because you're looking at trends and things I'm just not hearing or seeing anywhere else. But let's also talk about an event that you've been doing a lot of research on. In fact, I have actually gone and traveled to Europe and to Asia to do further in-depth analysis on this. And that's coming up October 24th of this year. And that is the squaring of the gas giants' planets with Earth and Sun in this configuration that we haven't seen since 79 AD. And why that's so important, if anybody wants to go and do some search engine looking, 79 AD, the big event there was the explosion of Mount Vesuvius, a gigantic volcanic eruption. And you're talking about that cycle is now in play again. And the way we know it's coming is through this astronomical configuration. It's not astrology. Well, who knows, what's the difference between astrology and astronomy, but we're getting this configuration, and you've been finding evidence of this configuration in paintings, and in statuary, talking about when this particular configuration occurs, which is about to occur on October 24th, that massive changes to the ocean and to the Earth start to happen. Can I let you riff on that for just a minute?
Yeah, and it's going to be electromagnetic. And just to answer that previous question, what's the difference between astronomy and astrology? 200 years ago, they were the same science. The astronomy gives you the XYZ axis to locate a point in space where you literally inhabit with the planet. Like, where are we? The astrology explains the energetics that the planet would pass through, because space is not all uniform and it's all equal. Some places are hotter, there's more plasma. Some places are more debris, and we come through that and we get all these comet showers depending on how strong the sun's magnetic field is, which also increases our shield, if you will. The electromagnetic field is definitely dropping now. Some of the newest measurements were at least 1% per 5 years, but there's some conjecture because it took Swarm offline, which is a series of satellites that used to give public data about the Earth's magnetic field, but once it started dropping faster than 1% per decade, they took all the information offline. So the numbers that are being given right now are 1% per year or 1% per 5 years. So that's a huge. And if you're looking at like how this so far, the North Pole is tracking, and that's 1 degree, of latitude moving. I mean, you're talking about the North Pole, geomagnetic North Pole moving like 60 miles in a year or more. That's a huge amount. Do the just simple maths, 10 years, that's 600 miles in a further direction than it was. So you start to think about, like, why is everything all tweaked out? But when it comes down to geomagnetic, the actual magnetic field of the planet decreasing, well, if that decreases, that's definitely going to affect the crust of our planet. So if you see more volcanoes going off, and the volcanoes are just about blocking of the sun and reducing the ability further to grow food on the planet. That's the whole thing. Everything that anybody out there doing research should be focusing on is the effect of being able to grow less food. Like the cause is being masked in many ways, shapes, and forms. But what are they masking? The reduction of food globally. So if you look at many of charts like on the cereal yields or the grain yields on how population has increased with not only the green revolution of fertilizer, which you can espouse to way better than I can, but just a general trend, more food, population goes up, less food, population goes down. Been like that through history. But what if you knew with these same cycles that we were coming into a time where we could only grow half as much food on the planet as we do right now? See, this is where we start to get into, all right, these electromagnetic effects visible on every other planet in our solar system as well. Every other planet is experiencing strange anomalies, from reversing atmospheres to lightning coming off to polar auroras where they were never seen before, brightening of cloud cells, expansion of cloud bands. There's a huge amount of anomalies that are being seen across the whole entire solar system, not just Earth. So when you're looking at electromagnetic effects, what is truly going to happen as we come in? Because this square, the Hyundai cross, is another one that's been sort of well referenced in the past. If you look at the Kabbalah, the 4 planets plug in, and then it brings you down to the Earth, and then the sun. That's the beginning of the cycle. Like, where's the completion? Is where I've been looking at. Like, how far out do we know? Where the completion of that, where it plugs into the bottom piece, and you get the full Kabbalah in front of you. I've been trying to dive into that for a minute. I've gone out past 2035 and I still can't find the bottom piece that plugs in. So if anybody knows what that is, I'm all ears to take those 2 pieces and then we'll get the starting of the cycle, which is beginning now. And what the plug-in piece should be the completion of the cycle. So obviously there is information about that. I mean, if it's like one of the most core tenets of certain belief systems, then obviously they're trying to preserve it so you never forget it. And you go down through history and you see all these same iconography, or another way to say same symbolism, across many religions and times. So we're back at it again. And this is the whole thing, is how is it going to affect humanity and the perception of the world? Because your brain right here, left, right, lobes, those are electrically connected. So if there's a disruption magnetically on our planet, or it changes field state, the way you actually see the world in front of you is going to change as well. But at the same time, you got to stay busy and grow your food and can it, because, other economic systems, just-in-time delivery, farm financing is going to dry up too. So your brain's going to be operating in a different state, and then the economy is going to be operating in a different fashion. And you're going to be on your own for a lot of these things to try to provide for your families for food. So and then you can see why the world's getting a little skittish right now, a little more on purpose. But that field alignment you're talking about is coming at the end of October. So remember a thing about magnetism, electromagnetism. It's very much like your light switch. There's a potentiality of current to go there. It doesn't, I mean, it's there, but it turns on in an instant right when you flip that switch. It doesn't slowly kind of turn on as you're walking toward the light switch, and it knows you're coming, and it's slowly building. And then finally, it's the same thing when you get into these electromagnetic field changes. A lot of them are sort of, instantaneous across the solar system. We're talking a couple of weeks or something like that. So the biggest event and the most powerful of these extremes that we're about to flow through, you're seeing the amplification now, but I believe it'll just be a week or two before, like that second week in October is really when we're going to start to see some, like, that is unbelievable type of extremes. We've seen some like strange tide action in the really high northern latitudes, where the tide heights can change like up to 20 feet in a day. Some of those areas are showing like the speed at which the tides are coming back in is just ferociously dangerous. Fishermen caught off guard, multi-generational fishermen, they can't even judge the tides anymore to even get their boats untied from the shorelines. I mean, wow, that kind of change coming in an instant. And then the volcanoes. And then you're talking about ash cover that's going to blanket crops, or reduce sunlight, and the ability for us to get the yields that we're used to. So even coming up into the event, if it pops off a bunch more volcanoes and send us into like a 535 AD, where you got multiple VEI 6s, 7s going off across the planet, you're looking at going to be like a haze around. So food, again, it comes back to the food. Like, You're going to bring it indoor and grow it, or how's government going to provide for, how are they going to give
Ah,
excuses for it?
yeah,
I'm at a blank
yeah.
for some things. Like, what's the excuse they're going to use? That's my whole thing.
Well, if I could go back a little bit
Yeah,
to,
go.
some of the physical evidence for this, you spent some time in Europe, and I believe it was Italy.
Mm.
And
And
as we've,
Croatia.
yeah, as we've discussed that, our history has been obscured, manipulated, contrived, changed. We have no, we're like, humanity is like a species with complete amnesia, and we don't really know. But throughout history, there have been people who have tried to warn us. And I was so impressed with that series of paintings that you found. And they all had a very similar thing. And I believe, and as you had brought forward, is that people had tried to communicate this event to other humans while doing it under, it's hard to believe, right? For millennium, I don't know how long. That's an interesting thing that I think that we will eventually figure out. But those paintings are fascinating. There's so many of them. I'll try to weave in some images here on post editing of this, where there's really bizarre, strange high waves, and then a ship clearly in distress, either broken or upside down or something. And then there's always these four uh, figures up in the uh, up in the sky. And as you had talked about, astronomy and astrology were all one science, and there was much more of a connection with the power of Jupiter and what Jupiter represented. And there's a male figure that represents Jupiter, and people were way more in tune with that. So they'll have these four figures up in the paintings representing those four gas giants in this configuration. Um, for me, I just think that's stunning, because this is clearly some kind of communication, just like some of the pyramids or some of the things that have been built. And there's only a crack of light that comes through when Sirius is in this particular time period every 26,000 years or something. I mean, there's clearly a communication in stone in that. And then these paintings are some kind, I mean, if it were just one or two paintings, David, but you were uncovering dozens and dozens and dozens of them, as well as statues that also had this same pattern in it.
Yeah, so let me just, I mean, it had already been validated once. You know that super yacht sinking, billionaire, and a few other people sank. Well, did you see the regatta races there too? They got blown in like these multi-million dollar regatta yachts, all got blown up. But what was so interesting was when I was looking at the wind patterning, the pattern of the wind and the waves looks exactly, I mean, exactly 100% what all of those different paintings were found. And for those of you who are wondering, that was in the Naval Museum in Venice. The old dusty museum, it was way at the bottom of the list. Like this thing, and the reason I really wanted to go there is because on the description, somebody wrote, "This thing hasn't been cleaned since like the 1980s, just covered in dust." And I don't know, maybe you go spend your time drinking coffee out somewhere watching the Basilica or whatever. And I was like, "No way! You mean they haven't
They
really
haven't
changed anything since the 1980s in
they
there?"
haven't touched it. They might have, so yeah, right.
Yeah, there were Starfort, paintings everywhere, and all because it was a military museum. All the star forts from they had 40 or so different star forts that were like paper mache that they'd done of each individual area, and then the time of control of those, the building construction dates, which didn't make sense to me either. But that whole huge wall of just like these massive waves coming in, destroying ships. But that's exactly what all these videos of the days of the storm that capsized the billionaire's boat. But then there was a regatta that was going on. And like I say, it ripped those boats to shreds, pushed them all to shore. But it was that same really very intense, steep, like 1 second between, trough duration on that, and which is stacked up, and the same kind of wind with the white caps on it with the same very short duration. And I saw that came right off the painting right there. So that actually is one of my next videos if anybody wants to watch. I'm trying to put it together for this weekend for y'all to chill out on the sofa and watch something connecting history with an event that mimics and shows that at least there's some validation that these are cyclical and they're coming back, and to look for this as a marker in time or an event marker that, yes, we're going cleanly down this trail.
We're in this point. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up. But thank you, David. And yes, I'm excited to watch that. And if you've been watching this and you're intrigued, I know some of the things he said might be, kind of going by a little bit fast. But he's got a lot of rock solid research. Clearly, I think you've gotten a taste for what David offers, and how to adapt 2030. What's the favorite channel that you like people to go to?
For sure, be Rumble, and please go there and subscribe. We're trying to grow our base on there too as a backup channel. You just saw with the arrest of the Telegram CEO. So our Telegram, or my Telegram channel, it's got around 4,500 people that routinely come in and check on the information there. I put up stuff pretty routinely, and also just started we rebranded our podcast with Ransom God and myself. We do a live show on Thursday nights. The new podcast is called civilizationcycle.com. Go to civilizationcycle.com. Put in your email if you want to get the show notes and things that we talk about on our live show. We delve deeper into some of these topics. Thanks for letting me ramble. Sometimes I get on the tangents, but I appreciate it, Marjory.
No, I appreciate you coming on. All right, y'all, adapt 2030, civilizationcycle.com.